in football. We have finally made it. We are here, week 1 of the NFL regular season. I am so excited about this. We get real football starting tomorrow night. Eagles, Cowboys. We're going to dive into that. Going to dive into the rest of the games this weekend. Before I do that, we are on our road to our first 100 subscribers. Before you do anything, please make sure you subscribe to this channel. It really helps me out. It's free for you to do and allows me to get my content out there. We're making an exciting community here where we can talk everything NFL football. So we'll dive into today's show shortly. But like I said, we're going to be talking about week 1 matchups, previewing those games, going to get into some predictions. So excited to do that. You might already see I commented in chat. Please make sure you're chatting. I want this to be as engaging as possible. Tell me what game you're most excited about watching. Also, feel free to tell me if there's any upsets that you see coming, players you're excited to see watch for the first time. We're going to be able to dive into all those things. So we'll go ahead and get started shortly. I'll give everyone a couple more seconds to pile in. Like I said, we're going to be diving into the week 1 of the regular season, starting out with Thursday's game, the Cowboys versus the Eagles. All right, so diving into things. First things first, like I said, Cowboys versus Eagles. Right now, the Philadelphia Eagles are favored in this game by 8.5 points. Again, this game is in Philadelphia. They are the reigning champions. They're going to have a Super Bowl ceremony. All of them already got their rings, but they're going to be putting up the banner this week on Thursday, tomorrow night. So I know everyone in Philadelphia is really excited about that. Obviously, that is just the beginning of what's going to be coming. First things first, let's talk about this matchup. There's certain things that I'm curious about when it comes to this game, and I think these factors are what could lead to either the Cowboys winning or the Eagles winning this game. Now, just to dive into it, the first things first is, can Dallas stop the run? Right? There's a couple reasons why I think this is an important factor. One, Jerry Jones, when he traded Micah Parsons, he went into a press conference, and one of the first things he talked about was the fact that he traded Micah Parsons because they couldn't stop the run. They needed more of a run defense, and Micah Parsons was not helping them out from that perspective. And so Jerry Jones added tackle Clark to their roster in order to help bolster stopping the run. Right, so that's reason number one. The other and most obvious factor when it comes to why it's important for Dallas to stop the run game is the fact that they're going up against Saquon Barkley. Right, Saquon Barkley was the rushing leader last year. He had over 2,000 yards. Probably could have broken the record if he played in the last game of the regular season, but the Eagles had already secured the number 1 seed, and so they were letting Saquon Barkley rest. Right, the other aspect of this, and when diving into this, I will say Jerry Jones is right in one factor, and that's the fact that they do struggle at stopping the run. Right, the Cowboys gave up 2,300 yards on the ground last year. Right, so think about that. If you were a team and you played the Cowboys every single week, you would have broken the rushing record in the NFL with 2,300 yards. Right, so giving up 2,300 yards, that's like saying, hey, we just created the best running back in the NFL that plays against us every single week. Now, Saquon Barkley against the Cowboys, he's had a 67-yard game, and then he had a 167-yard game against the Cowboys. The last game against the Cowboys is where he had 167 yards. So he clearly has seen success against this run defense. And so, again, for me, if Dallas wants to have any shot at winning this game, they're going to need to be able to stop the run in this game. Now, another interesting aspect and something that I'm going to be looking for in this game is, do the Eagles have a Super Bowl hangover? Right? Again, they're hanging the banner. They talked about this. Apparently the Eagles team, the players are not even going to be out there for the banner, which I think to me is a good sign that they're just trying to focus on this season. They've probably already celebrated the Super Bowl a lot, and they're saying, hey, you know what, we're not going to be able to see it. Like, we're just going to be in the locker room, or maybe they're going to be doing some pregame warm-ups. But to me, I think that's a good sign that says, hey, we are focused on this year. Last year is last year, and we're moving on. The other aspect of this is the fact that the Eagles did lose a lot of talent, right? I've talked about this in a previous episode, but when you lose people like C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Darius Slay, right, Josh Sweat, those are impact players on your defense, and so you have a pretty good offense that you're going up against, right? I'd say even better than good. The Cowboys passing game especially could be very dangerous this year. CeeDee Lamb is a perennial wide receiver one in the NFL, right? 2 years ago, he led the NFL in receptions and yards, and last year, he wasn't that far behind. So to me, having the ability to step up for these younger cornerbacks that they're going to be expecting to have a major role in this game is going to be super important to me. The other aspect is, again, how do the Cowboys passing attack look with Pickens out there? Again, I've mentioned this before, but CeeDee Lamb has been the guy for a few years, and he hasn't really had much help around him. And so for me, does this make CeeDee Lamb's life easier, right? Or does he just see less touches? Because there's two different ways that generally I see this happening. It's when you bring in another star player, either one, it ends up helping your best player. I think the Bengals are a great example of this. They didn't bring someone in, but I believe that Jamar Chase has the ability to have the games he has, because it's so hard to just focus on double teaming him when they have T. Higgins on the other side, right? That's a huge factor in the passing game success that the Bengals have. And so the Cowboys need to find a way to replicate that, because CeeDee Lamb, like I said, he had 101 receptions and 1,200 yards last year. Like, that's an awesome season, right? You're going to have to essentially repeat that this year if you're the Cowboys, if you want any chance of really being successful. And then on the other side, George Pickens needs to step up and provide even more value, right? I'm not saying he needs to have a 1,200-yard season himself, but if he adds 800-900, maybe even crazy like 1,000 yards, I don't think that's going to be the case for the Cowboys this year. Maybe it will be because their defense is going to struggle, but again, they need to have that powerful of a passing game in order for the Cowboys to be successful. Because right now, I mean, I'm looking at this rushing, tandem, and I don't have a lot of hope in that group. Right, the Cowboys are coming into this season with two brand new running backs as their main running backs. It's Javonte Williams and it's Miles Sanders, and both of them have never necessarily been the the workhorse, the three down back sort of person. Now they are going to be a tandem, so or a duo, so that's going to help them from that perspective. But still, they're not going to be able to rely on that rushing game to be successful, in my opinion. I think that rushing game is going to really struggle, especially against a very tough Eagles defensive line. The Eagles defensive line is extremely impressive. They've just continuously bolstered it. They did lose Graham, who's a veteran and probably more so of a locker room and leader sort of player in the past couple of years, right? I think his production has definitely fallen. But they've still been able to fill that in with other really good defensive linemen like Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, right? I really think that Jordan Davis is going to have a great season. He's lost a lot of weight. He looks like he's extremely focused on success and working hard this season. And then Jalen Carter is just a game breaker. Jalen Carter, I think, will be talked about so much more this season because of the fact that I think he's going to be great, but also like there's just not going to be as many. There's not a Josh Sweat he's competing with when it comes to pass rushing, right? I think he's going to be potentially an 8, 9, 10 sack, defender this year for the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, I want to get into a little bit of another interesting factor, and it's really just who do I consider to be the X factors in this game? And I think the first one for the Cowboys is extremely obvious, and it's just purely because his name's been in the media so much. But it's also a huge reason why, I mentioned the run game before. Kenny Clark, the defensive tackle for the Cowboys, he's my X factor in this game. If Kenny Clark can stop Saquon Barkley and force the Eagles to focus on their passing game, that's going to be a huge value add for the Cowboys. I think if they're able to stop that run, it really gives them the best shot of winning this game. Because again, Saquon Barkley was the MVP last year, and generally in the first week of the regular season, offenses lag behind on defenses, right? Offenses, it takes a little bit more time to get in sync, to get in a rhythm with each other. And I expect that to happen even with a Super Bowl team like the Philadelphia Eagles. And so if Kenny Clark can take advantage of that, whether it's just miscommunications, lack of communications, missteps, right? Just being a little bit rusty. The Eagles offense didn't necessarily get a lot of work in the preseason. I think they did play in some of the preseason, but this is their first time really getting out there against another opponent in a real game in quite some time, right? Basically the Super Bowl. And so can the Cowboys take advantage of that a little bit of that rust and the time that it takes to get up and running? I think that's going to be a huge aspect in what can really make the Cowboys potentially win this game. Again, that's the long shot, but to me, if they're able to stop Saquon Barkley in the run, that gives them the best chance. Now, from the Eagles' perspective, I really have two X factors, and it's because of the fact that I've talked about the Cowboys' passing offense. But to me, Adoree Jackson and Quinyon Mitchell, right, the two corners, those are the people that really need to have a great game for the Eagles in order to just completely handcuff and stop this Cowboys team. Again, the Philadelphia Eagles are favored by 8.5 points. I could see that very easily becoming 14 point spread if they're able to stop the passing offense of the Cowboys. It would be a blowout if they're able to stop CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. For me, again, when it comes to a prediction for this game, I see too much talent on the Philadelphia Eagles side. I truly see the Eagles winning tomorrow night pretty big. To me, I see this game being 28-13. Right? I think the Cowboys are going to get a touchdown and 2 field goals, and I see the Eagles being able to march down the field pretty regularly. My prediction is Saquon Barkley is going to have the first touchdown of this game, and he could have as many as 2 or 3 potentially. Next game. We're going to dive into the Friday night game. So we actually get a Friday night game this year, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know if that's happened in prior seasons. I feel like this is a new thing. But Friday night in Brazil, of all places, the Chiefs are playing the Chargers. Now, this is obviously an exciting matchup because this is an AFC matchup, right? Your AFC West matchup, I should say. So Thursday's game is an NFC East matchup. Friday's game, AFC West matchup. And you don't always get in division matchups in week one. It happens from time to time, and there's a couple more, maybe even there's 2 more this week, I think, that we'll get into. But to me, the Chiefs-Chargers game is going to be just as exciting, if not even more exciting, than the Philadelphia Eagles-Cowboys game. And there's really a couple reasons for that. And if you watched my show, my prior episode, it was episode 15, when I get into AFC West predictions, I actually have the Chargers winning this division. Now, we'll get into that more, but to me, some of the biggest things that I'm going to be watching in this first regular season game for these teams is, how do the Chiefs match up against the Chargers passing offense? I don't think enough people are talking about the wide receiving core that the Chargers have. For me, I think they're quietly like the second, maybe third best wide receiving core in the NFL. Right? We talked about Pickens, we talked about CeeDee Lamb, but I love Ladd McConkey, Keenan Allen, and Quentin Johnston. Like, Ladd McConkey, that guy's going to be a perennial Pro Bowler, potentially even become an all-pro caliber wide receiver, in my opinion. He's fast, he's quick, he's got great hands, He's got amazing vision. His yards after the catch is just unbelievable. And then you add Keenan Allen back into the mix for the Chargers. Keenan Allen is the best route runner in the NFL, bar none. I think Devontae Adams is another player that's up there, but Keenan Allen to me is extremely undervalued. I cannot believe, one, that the Chargers let him walk to begin with. I'm glad that they got him back. Like the Bears only signed him to 1 year is crazy to me. I expect a lot out of Keenan Allen. I think he's going to be a huge difference maker for this Chargers team, allowing them to move the ball down the field. And then again, Quentin Johnston. I think they don't give enough respect to Quentin Johnston. I was looking at the last couple of years. He definitely struggled with his rookie year, and I think the biggest slight against Quentin Johnston is the fact that he does drop the ball at times. Right, Quentin Johnston does drop the ball at sometimes, and generally they're very easy passes that he's dropped in the past. But he doubled his production from his rookie season to his second year, which to me is just a huge indicator for someone's trajectory and whether or not they're going to be successful. Right? He had about 400 yards receiving his rookie season. He had over 700 last season. The biggest difference was really his touchdowns, right? He had 2 his first year and he had 8 last year. I expect that to be the same thing this year because, again, when you are the opponent, right, and in this case it's the Kansas City Chiefs, how do you defend against those 3 receivers? Oh, yeah, by the way, you also have this amazing new running back, Amarian Hampton, who's like a home run hitter. So I expect this passing offense to be lethal. The Chiefs have a really good secondary, and it is led by Trent McDuffie. But is that going to be enough to stop this passing offense? Because, again, they have, I think, 3 really good receivers out there. And that's going to be a huge, I think, aspect of why I like the Chargers, right? Again, they have a great run game. The biggest concern, again, is the left and right tackle situation. Rashawn Slater getting injured and then Joe Alt moving from right tackle to left tackle makes it so you're replacing essentially 2 tackles in a sense, right? You replace your left tackle, now you're replacing your right tackle by Joe Alt moving. But to me, there's going to be some question marks there. The Chiefs do have a good defense, right? I think Chris Jones and George Karlaftis are a pretty good duo when it comes to rushing the passer. So that is going to be a challenge for the Chargers, is that offensive line. But again, the biggest matchup to me is definitely the Chargers receivers against the Chiefs secondary. Now, the other aspect to this that I'm really curious to see, and this is on the Chiefs side of things, is does Travis Kelce get off to a slow start this year? So Travis Kelce, obviously household name at this point. He is probably more famous than any football player right now in the NFL, potentially now even in NFL history with his relationship with Taylor Swift. He deserves more credit than that, though. People tend to forget how good of a tight end he's been in the past. Last season he definitely had a down year. It was I don't know if it was less than what people expected because he is older, but at the same time it wasn't the production that people are used to, is what I'd say. That's probably the best way to put it. But Travis Kelce in his older age has generally gotten off to slower starts. Really, the past 2 years I've noticed this the most. He's completely ready to go and he turns it on for the playoffs. Obviously, I mean the Chiefs always make it to the Super Bowl. That's a clear, obvious, that's a clear and obvious opinion and fact is the fact that they're generally always making it to the Super Bowl, and Travis Kelce is generally a huge reason for that. But like last year, I was looking at it, and he didn't reach even I'll just say a 90-yard game until week 7, and that's actually the first game where he scored a touchdown. So you didn't see 90 yards or a touchdown from Travis Kelce last year until week 7. And without Rashee Rice out there, right? Rashee Rice is suspended for the first 6 games of the season. They're going to need Travis Kelce to be ready to go week 1. Again, they're playing against the Chargers. This is a divisional game. My prediction is the Chargers are going to win this division. I said it was going to be in some weird tiebreaker. This is a part of this that could really be an aspect of that tiebreaker, right? Is if the Chargers win this game. And again, They don't have Rashee Rice. Hollywood Brown, he's coming off of an ankle injury, right? He missed a lot of the preseason. They're saying he's full practicing, but I mean, Hollywood Brown hasn't been a consistent receiver playing in most games for like 3 years. I think it really hasn't been since he was with the Baltimore Ravens that he's played in a full season. And so again, that's a huge reason why Travis Kelce can't get off to a slow start like he has generally in the past couple of years. I'm going to be looking for that, and it's going to be important for the the Chiefs' success in this game. Another important aspect is and something I'm going to be looking for in this game is, can the Chargers create a pass rush against Mahomes to create tough situations? Generally Mahomes has done pretty well under pressure in the past, but I noticed this especially in the Super Bowl. Like, he really was struggling against pressure. Right? He had like a 67 QBR in the Super Bowl, and he was just constantly getting pressed by defenders. Right? He was constantly having people in his face, people hitting him, and so again, can the Chargers create that pass rush that's going to cause urgency for Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs offense? Because again, if they're able to put him under duress, I think that's going to be a huge factor in this game. Now, when it comes to X factors in this game, right? There's one from each side. Number one is Omarion Hampton, right? I talked about him already. I'm very confident in the passing game for the Chargers. Omarion Hampton, I'm not worried about, but if this rookie running back can have a great game against the Chiefs week 1, that's going to be a huge factor in this game, right? If you aren't able to stop the pass and the run, that's perfect recipe for a win for the Chargers. And then on the other side, my X factor for the Chiefs is Isaiah Pacheco. Isaiah Pacheco, I love Isaiah Pacheco. I think he's a workhorse. The guy just keeps his feet moving all the time. Like, that is, when I think of Isaiah Pacheco, I just think of someone that's just constantly moving his feet and trying to push the pile. He'll run into people and just keep those legs going, and it's probably better than any other running back I've seen in a long time from that perspective. He's got a little bit of an old school vibe when it comes to that. And so again, if Isaiah Pacheco is able to run the ball and to keep some of that pressure off of Patrick Mahomes, I think that the Chiefs are going to have a really good chance to win this game. And, when it comes to a prediction, what I'm expecting to end results to be, when I think this game's going to be a little bit messy. And I think it's going to be messy because they're in a very uncharted territory. They're in a completely different country, right? That does actually present a factor. Like, if you watch games in London and in Germany now, they're generally pretty messy games. They're not like either one team or both teams are just struggling, especially like it's time change, it's the travel, right? Flying to Brazil, that's like an 8-9 hour flight, 10-hour flight if you're going direct from somewhere like Kansas City. LA is going to be even further, but that's not an easy flight to make. And again, to me, I see this being a messy game, and I actually expect the Chargers to find a way to win this one out. 21-17 is my score prediction for the Chiefs Chargers game, right? So Chargers are going to win 21-17. We're going to get into the Sunday 1 o'clock slate to start things out. And this is actually another divisional game that we're going to get into. It's the Buccaneers at the Falcons, right? So the Buccaneers are actually favored by 2.5 in Atlanta. So generally, if you don't follow much around the spreads, generally the home team gets like a 3-point advantage to start out. And so really what they're saying is they expect the Bucs to probably win by about four points, right? Because they're taking one of those points away from the Falcons. And so the Buccaneers, I think this is going to be an interesting game. And the thing I'm actually most interested to see when it comes to the Buccaneers Falcons is what does Michael Penix look like in year 2? There's been a lot of talk, a lot of confidence, a lot of buzz around the Falcons this year. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that Bijan Robinson was a great running back. His second year in the league, he absolutely crushed it for the Falcons. He had over 1,400 rushing yards. Michael Penix played in like 3 games essentially. It was actually like 4 games to end the season last year. And to me, his stats were not super impressive, right? Michael Penix threw for 775 yards, and he had 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. At the same time, Michael Penix didn't play in a single preseason game, right? You generally don't see that when it's someone that is still trying to figure things out, right? That's generally the first sign. I know he's not in the quarterback competition, so he doesn't need to prove anything from that perspective. But when you're a younger quarterback and you need to figure some things out, and you need to get in rhythm, you need to get into a flow, you're out there in preseason games, and it was really shocking to me that Michael Penix wasn't playing in any of those games. I know he's had injuries in the past, mostly in college, right? He's in his second year in Atlanta and didn't have any injuries last year, but he's had some injuries, and maybe that's why they were holding him out. But to me, like, there's a lot of hype around Michael Penix. I'm not really sure. I'm not sold on him yet, right? I do think he has an amazing running back in Bijan Robinson. Again, he had over 1,400 yards rushing. And then you have players like Drake London, who had an amazing season last year. He had almost 1,300 yards receiving. He had 9 touchdowns. Even Darnell Mooney had a great year last year. He had almost 1,000 yards and 5 touchdowns. So he has good weapons around him. The interesting aspect to me is the fact that he's talked so much about Kyle Pitts. I don't know if that's something where they're just trying to, like, he's trying to boost Kyle Pitts' confidence, but Michael Penix made like a point to talk about Kyle Pitts in press conferences, and so to me, that's going to be something I'm really interested to see. Um, I think Bijan Robinson, from a rushing perspective, I expect him to have a really good game in this game. I do know that the Buccaneers, they have a really solid defensive line, right? Like Vita Vea is just like a staple now in that perspective, but Bijan Robinson is sort of a next level sort of running back to me. And I think he's going to take the next step and become potentially the top running back in the NFL. And in order for the Falcons, I think, to have any shot at winning against the Bucs, Bijan Robinson's going to need to have like 100+ yard game and at least 1 touchdown. Now on the other side of the ball, right? The Buccaneers, I'm really excited about, and I'm really high on this Buccaneers team. I think this Buccaneers team is a lot better than people are talking about. I think Baker Mayfield deserves a lot more respect than what he's getting currently. And also, I love the draft pick of Emeka Egbuka. I expect him to have a huge debut in this game, right? Michael Evans, he's getting a little bit older, right? He is getting older. He's had, I think it's something like 12 straight seasons of like over 1,000 yards. But Emeka Egbuka is the guy that I see really stepping into those shoes. I love Chris Godwin as well, but look for Emeka Egbuka to become the second receiver, potentially even receiver number 1 for Baker Mayfield by the end of the season. He didn't get as much respect and as much love because Ohio State is such a deep receiving team. But Emeka Egbuka, he reminds me a lot of Jackson Smith and Jigba, but actually has better speed and probably better ball skills. And I love Jackson Smith and Jigba. I'll talk about him more in this show. But to me, again, I expect Emeka Egbuka to have over 100 yards receiving in this game. I don't see I don't see him having a struggle in his first regular season game. I think he's going to have a solid debut. From a end of the game result perspective, I see the Bucs winning this game 28-20. I see the Bucs stopping Michael Penix. I see them really making this a tough game for Michael Penix in this regular season start. And I really do think that the Bucs defense is going to be humming. Like Baker Mayfield could potentially lead the league in passing yards again this year. I truly believe that. Next, we're going to get into another divisional game, right? So week 1, I'm loving this already. And again, while you're watching, guys, make sure you comment below. Here's another thing you can comment, like who's going to be the upset of the week. Tell me who you expect, if there's any upsets you see coming this week. I'm going to be talking about the Bengals Browns next. The Bengals are actually favored by 5.5 in this game. This is in Cleveland as well. I don't think anyone's shocked by this sort of spread, though. I mean, the Browns are they're just in they're in the factory of sadness level of the Browns right now, right? One of the biggest questions and the thing I'm going to be most interested to see in this game, and it's similar to what I talked about with Travis Kelce, is did the Bengals get off to a fast start? Like Joe Burrow has like a historically terrible record when it comes to starting the season, like historically bad. And I'm not putting it all on Joe Burrow, but as the starting quarterback, generally you get the brunt of this. They are terrible in the beginning of seasons. Like last year, they started the season 2-4, right? They lost a game against the Patriots week 1 that no one expected them to lose, right? The Patriots won 3 games last year, and one of them was against the Bengals in week 1. And so to me, the Bengals need to get off to a hot start this season. They cannot be playing from behind like they were last year to try to make the playoffs. They almost did it last year in a miracle, but they weren't quite, it wasn't quite enough. And they just can't afford to do that because their defense is just not there. Trey Hendrickson coming back is a huge value add to them and a huge help, but still they just don't have enough on that defensive side. I will say that I think this is the best possible matchup for the Bengals to have in order to have a good start to the season, right? The Browns, there's no one really expecting much out of the Browns. Maybe that goes into their favor, but they have a 40-year-old quarterback starting for them in Joe Flacco. And I think this is a real good chance for the Bengals to have a season where they actually start out with some momentum. If they get off to a slow start, it's because this Browns defense really shut them down, right? If Myles Garrett is able to get to Joe Burrow on a regular basis, that's really going to be your only hope for the Browns winning this game. Because again, to me, this Bengals offense is just way too powerful, right? I talked about the Chargers pass offense. The Bengals is second to none. The Bengals receiving core is just absolutely insane. I don't think people are talking about Yosevas enough, but Yosevas to me is a great receiver. If he didn't have T. Higgins and Jamar Chase to compete with, I think you'd be hearing a lot more people talk about Yosevas. Now, when it comes to how I see this game going, I see the Bengals winning this game 24-13. Sorry, I think the Bengals will win this game 24-13. It'll be an easy game for them, again, to get into the swing of things for week 1. It's a divisional game as well, so that really helps them out from that perspective, getting the first W in the division as well, setting up the Bengals for a faster start than they have in the past. Now, this next game, I'll be honest, it's Dolphins and the Colts, right? And I don't think a lot of people are necessarily marking this one down as a must-watch game. But to me, there's still some really interesting aspects to this game. Mainly for me, I talked about cohesion in the past being an issue for Miami. And, I don't know if you've heard, but recently they announced the captains, obviously, for most of these teams. And Tyreek Hill was not named a captain for the Dolphins, which is the first time he's not been a captain since he started there. And that really confirms to me that these cohesion issues, these relationship issues between, the coach McDaniel, between Tyreek and Tua, it's not resolved, right? And I think the team also has shown that they do not want to put Tyreek in a leadership role because of what happened last year, right? He ended the season talking about how he demands a trade and how he can't win in Miami. And he's stuck there, right? I don't think anyone's willing to pay the contract that Tyreek has anymore. He did have a down year last year. So to me, can Tyreek and Tua put this behind them, right? Like I think something that could really help their relationship and get them going is if they have success, right? If you work well with someone and you see success, you can let some of the bad stuff behind you, right? And I think if Tua and Tyreek can get off to a fast start, that's going to be something that can really, really help catapult the Dolphins. Because to me right now, the Dolphins are sort of floundering. Like I see them being a team that is going to be in a rebuild situation after this year if they do not see success. I also do not really expect there to be a lot of success from that perspective. The other things I'm really interested to see in this game, and it's the obvious one. It's like, does Daniel Jones actually prove that he should be a starter in the NFL? Right? He lost his job in New York. The Colts had the competition between him and Anthony Richardson. It didn't make a lot of sense to me to start, Daniel Jones right off the bat because of Anthony Richardson being, a first round pick for the Colts not that long ago. Um, but the Dolphins do have a pretty weak secondary, in my opinion. And so I do see this Colts offense being able to move the ball. I expect Donnie Mitchell, to have a much better year this year. I've seen a lot more flashes from him in training camp and in preseason that shows me that he's ready to take that next step. I'm not saying he's going to be, a 1,000-yard receiver for them, but I do expect him to have, 600, 700 yards for the Colts this year. And, on top of that, you have Michael Pittman, who I think is going to be a 1,000-yard receiver this year potentially. And then you have Tyler Warren, the rookie tight end, right? I think Tyler Warren is going to be an amazing safety net for Daniel Jones. They always say a solid tight end is like a rookie's best friend. When you're a struggling quarterback and you're trying to prove yourself, and you don't want to make a lot of mistakes, a good tight end like a Tyler Warren could really help you out. Now, I do see this being an ugly game, but I do see the Colts winning this game 20-17. So it will be a close game. And again, the biggest factors to me is, can Tua and Tyreek put last year behind them, and can Daniel Jones prove that he should be a starter in the NFL? Like, those are the two biggest factors for me. Next up, we're going to talk about the Raiders and the Patriots. Now, diving into this Raiders and Patriots game, there's the excitement of two. They're not new head coaches, but they're new head coaches with their respective teams, right? Mike Vrabel, going back to New England, being the head coach for the Patriots, where he formerly played, is going to be really exciting to see and interesting to watch. I love the type of culture that Mike Vrabel builds, and so to me, that's going to be interesting. And then obviously you have Pete Carroll on the other side. That's now the head coach for the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, this game is in New England, and to start this game, New England's favored by 2.5 points. So in a sense, they actually expect the Raiders to be a better team than the Patriots to start this season. But to me, I think this is a great game for Vrabel and the Patriots to start the season, right? I'm looking to see how Drake May has progressed to start this season. And I think having a team travel from basically the West Coast to New England for a 1 o'clock game is a great warm-up game. And I'm not saying that the Raiders are going to be walked all over, but at the same time, that is a challenging position to be in for the Las Vegas Raiders. Like, traveling to the East Coast and playing a 1 o'clock game is not easy to do, right? And so for me, I think that's going to be a huge factor in this game. I also want to see how Ashton Jeanty handles the Vrabel style defense. I think that's going to be really interesting. I see Vrabel really dialing up some schemes and focusing on stopping Ashton Jeanty and making Geno Smith win this game for the Raiders. I think this is a really good test for both Vrabel's defense and for Ashton Jeanty to start out this season, because if Ashton Jeanty wins that battle, if you see Ashton Jeanty leave this game with over 100 yards and a touchdown, I think there's actually a pretty good chance that the Raiders would win this game. But again, the other aspect to me is that I'm interested to see is who has the better game between Ashton Jeanty and TreVeyon Henderson. TreVeyon Henderson came onto the scene with extremely exciting fashion for the Patriots to start the preseason. The first play of the game, he ran a kickoff back for like over 100 yards for a touchdown. And I think TreVeyon Henderson is going to be a workhorse for the Patriots this entire year. And so I'm hopeful for the Patriots offense. They definitely struggled last year. I think adding someone like a Stephon Diggs is going to be a huge help. And then also adding TreVeyon Henderson is going to be super helpful as well. I think Will Campbell, the left tackle they drafted, is going to help give Drake May more time as well. So to me, again, I do expect this to be a little bit more of an exciting game than people expect. And I think it'll be like a not a messy game. I think both of these coaches are really good coaches. Like, I respect Pete Carroll and Vrabel so much. I think that they're going to really have their team dialed in and ready to go. I do see the Patriots winning this game 23-17. I think Again, I think the Vrabel style defense is going to do enough to stop a West Coast team that's having to travel to the East Coast for an early game. I think they're going to take a little bit too long to get up and running that Raiders offense. And so I see the Patriots winning this game 23-17, potentially having one defensive touchdown, right? That's like my odd prediction from that perspective, but I do see the Patriots getting like a defensive touchdown in this game. Next game I'm going to go over, and this is probably the least anticipated game potentially of the week one. I'm talking about the Arizona Cardinals versus the New Orleans Saints. Now, obviously, most people are not expecting much from either one of these teams really this year. I have heard some crazy predictions that the Cardinals might actually win the NFC West. Like if they do that, I'd be extremely shocked. Again, to me, Kyler Murray is just one of those quarterbacks that he's shown that he could be a potential MVP style quarterback. Then more often than not, he's just extremely inconsistent. The inconsistency that Kyler Murray has just makes it so that I cannot put my faith in the Cardinals really. And so for me, like what I'm most curious about is like does Spencer Rattler actually belong in the NFL? Like, not can he be a starter? Like, I'm confident that he's not going to be a starter for much longer than this season. But to me, it's like, does he even belong in the NFL? Like, that's what I'm curious to see from like the Saints' perspective. Like, they actually have serviceable weapons out there, and I like their line to an extent. Like, I think they did a good job of drafting some offensive linemen. And so for me, like, can Spencer Rattler move the ball down the field? Can he be a game manager, right? Can he not lose a game for a team? I think that's going to be a huge evaluation aspect and plus for the Saints is if he can just be a game manager and be able to move the ball down the field with this team. Because, again, they do have serviceable weapons, right? I love Alvin Kamara. I think Alvin Kamara is a great running back. They don't talk about him enough just purely because he's on a team that's been struggling the last couple years. So again, like the biggest factor for me is Spencer Rattler for the Cardinals, and then can Kyler and Marvin Harrison start this season out strong? You know, there's a lot of conversations around Marvin Harrison and what to expect out of him this year, and everyone was really excited to see how much he bulked up and got bigger going into this regular season. And so for me, none of that means anything until you put on pads and you actually play in these games. And so can Marvin Harrison Jr. actually save Kyler Murray's career in Arizona? I don't expect Kyler to be there much longer if they have another struggling year. At this point in the NFL, it's like, what have you done for me lately, right? I think Daniel Jones is a great example of that. You know, he had a Pro Bowl year, and then he had a really bad year after that, and he's no longer in New York. And he had just signed a contract. It wasn't a huge contract, but they gave him 1 year to prove it, and he wasn't able to. And Kyler Murray's at this point, I think he's 2 or 3 years into his 4 or 5 year contract. I could see the Cardinals trying to cut bait if this isn't a strong year for Kyler Murray. And so Marvin Harrison needs to be open and be a target for him early and often for them to be able to see success. And does Josh Sweat cause issues for the Saints? Right, Josh Sweat, newly acquired Cardinal pass rusher, did a great job for the Super Bowl winning Eagles. Can he wreak havoc for the Saints? Again, I talked about the fact that they did a good job of drafting on the offensive line. The Saints have, like, I really like Banks, right, that they got the left tackle. So Josh Sweat, I see being the guy he's going to match up against. And so if Josh Sweat can cause some trouble for the Saints in the backfield, I think that this is going to be an easy win for the Cardinals. I expect the Cardinals to win this game 28-20. I think that both teams are going to have pretty high scoring games. I don't think either team has like a purely dominant defense, and they have pretty solid offenses. So that's really where I see this game ending up is 28-20, Cardinals winning this game in New Orleans. Next matchup we're going to get into Steelers versus the Jets. Right, so this is an interesting matchup purely because, well, there's a couple of different reasons, but I think it's interesting that these teams essentially traded quarterbacks. Now, it wasn't a trade, but Aaron Rodgers was the starting quarterback for the Jets last year, and for a period of time, there was also Justin Fields, the starter for the Steelers. Now Justin Fields, starter for the Jets, Aaron Rodgers, starter for the Steelers. You know, that alone is going to be an interesting, because a lot of people are holding on hope for Aaron Rodgers. A lot of people think that Aaron Rodgers can still somewhat be the Aaron Rodgers of the past. I don't think people think he can be the MVP caliber quarterback he's been in the past, but people think that Aaron Rodgers could potentially lead the Steelers team, to the playoffs. He's 41 years old, and so for me, if the Steelers, like if Aaron Rodgers is able to see success with the Steelers early on, that would give me a lot more confidence in the Steelers team. I'm still holding my reservations. I know Mike Tomlin's an amazing coach, right? He has that statistic where he's never had a losing record. I'm getting to the point now with just their aging defense that they're starting to flirt with that record. I really do think that this could potentially be the year where that's not necessarily the case. The other aspect of this is, like, the Jets defense is really good. Like, I love the matchup of Sauce Gardner going up against DK Metcalf. Like, I think Sauce Gardner is going to give DK a lot of trouble. And then from that perspective, you have to think about this. Who's the other weapon that he can really pass to? It's not a receiver, right? They put Robert Woods on their practice squad, and he just asked to be released, so he's not even on the team anymore. Really, you're depending on your tight ends. You're depending on Pat Freiermuth, and you're depending on Jonnu Smith to be the targets for the Steelers throughout this game. Because, again, I don't think you're going to see DK Metcalf lighting up Sauce Gardner. Sauce Gardner is one of the best cornerbacks there is in the NFL right now. And so for me, I think that's going to be really the tale of this game is can the Pittsburgh Steelers move the ball without having DK Metcalf being able to get the amount of targets that they're probably hoping for. I actually see the Jets winning this game in a close game. I see the Jets winning this game in New York 17-14, right? So it's going to be a lower scoring game. I think both defenses are going to have a huge impact on this game. And I see the Jets actually winning this one out 17-14. Next up, here's another divisional game, and this one I think is going to be actually a pretty good game, and I'm kind of surprised they put it in the 1 p.m. slot. I actually expect this to potentially be the best game in the 1 p.m. slot, but it's the Giants versus the Commanders, right? So Giants are heading to Washington, and I think, to me, first off, it's going to be interesting to see like how this Commanders offensive line handles this Giants pass rush. I don't think people are talking about the Giants pass rush enough with Kayvon Thibodeau, you have Abdul Carter, and Brian Burns. Those three edge rushers, there's so much speed, quickness, and strength that they have, and they're young, and there's three of them. Right? That's the other aspect is, these tackles are going to be going up against them regularly, and they're going to be rotating in and out. They're going to have fresh legs. And I really expect this Giants pass rush to be the top in the NFL this year. I really do think that that's going to be the case. And so the Commanders added a rookie left tackle, or a rookie right tackle, I should say, and then Laramie Tunsil in the offseason. Who wins those matchups, right? Who is Laramie Tunsil able to stop Abdul Carter? Abdul Carter, I know this was the preseason, but he had some win rate of it was over 50% of his pass rushes he was winning in the preseason. Like, that just doesn't happen. Like, you're generally happy with somewhere around 30 to 40% would be really good. And so if you're winning over 50%, you're setting a marker there that, hey, watch out, offenses, I'm coming for your quarterback. Now, the other aspect that I'm really interested to see is how did Debo and McLaurin work together, right? Debo came in from San Francisco, and to me, he's just like a Swiss Army knife. That guy can do everything. I think his first play in the preseason that he had, he had it was an end around, and it was a run, right? And then the next play he caught a ball. right? He can do so many different things. And so being able to have Debo and McLaurin out there just opens up your offense so much more. You know, I've talked about this before. I didn't really understand why they traded Brian Robinson, right? I didn't really get that move because to me he was their rushing game. Like they have an older Austin Eckler, and then they have like guys like Chris Gonzalez and some other running backs like Krosky Merritt, who's a rookie. But to me, they didn't really have the weapons in the rushing attack to be able to let him go. But maybe they just expect Debo to be that guy for them. Maybe they're going to be handing the ball off to Debo more than I expect. Again, seeing Debo and McLaurin out there, they're going to open up the field for each other, one way or the other. And so being able to manage that for Jaden Daniels is going to be a huge thing to look for. He did a great job of that, in my opinion, in LSU. Right, he's used to dealing with really good receivers. He had Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas, right? So he knows how to play with two marquee receivers, and so I think he's going to do a good job of handling that. And so for me, that's going to be a really interesting factor to me in this game is what do those two look like on the same field together. And then I myself, I wish it was going to be Jackson Dart that's going to be out there. I think they recently announced that Russell Wilson will be the starter. They put Jackson Dart behind Russell Wilson as the starter. But to me, I'm really hoping they give Jackson Dart a start out there. But again, Russell Wilson, can you handle, can you handle this team, right? Are they really going to hand you the keys to this? Because he knows everyone's wanting Jackson Dart, right? I don't think Russell Wilson is like ignorant to that sense that the Giants fans and probably the organization want Jackson Dart out there sooner rather than later. And so he's out there to prove himself. How many games can you keep yourself out there on the field? Because I don't think it's like an if, it's just a when that you're going to see Jackson Dart out there. I think this is going to be another close game. I see the Commanders winning this game 21-17. Again, it is in Washington. They're favored by 6.5 points, but again, I don't think people are respecting this Giants pass rush enough. Like this is a game wrecking pass rush, and so again, I'm excited about this game. Next game we're going to get into Panthers at Jaguars, right? AFC South versus NFC South. Jacksonville is favored by 3.5 points in this game. Now, for me, what I'm most curious to see is Bryce Young able to keep it going, keep that momentum going from the end of last season, right? I've talked about it ad nauseum, right? He had a rough start to last season. He got benched for Andy Dalton. Things weren't much better with Andy Dalton, so they threw Bryce Young back into the fire. And he had a slower start, but he was becoming more consistent. By the end of the season, his last 3 games, he threw 7 touchdowns and no interceptions. Right? You're going to be happy with that with any quarterback, even one that you're just saying like, hey, like I need you to prove you belong out there. So he was producing for the Carolina Panthers, and this was a new head coach coming in last year, new system and everything. And Bryce Young started to get acclimated to it, and he built some momentum. And obviously the end of the season happened, and so can you actually keep it going? Can you start that back up? And a big aspect of that to me is, does Ted McMillan have himself a welcome to the league game, right? Can he get over 100 yards and a touchdown in this game? I think that's going to be a huge aspect, right? Is Travis Hunter matched up against him? Who do they have matched up against Ted McMillan, right? And then on the other side of that is how much do we actually see of Travis Hunter on both offense and defense? I saw from the depth chart perspective, he is slotted as a starting receiver, and he's actually a backup cornerback, which is interesting to me because I really expected it to be the other way around. I thought that Travis Hunter, because of the Jaguars' defensive struggles last year, they were going to focus him on the defensive side, but I'm also hearing that they're going to have like a pitch count for him, and that's just such uncharted waters in the NFL. Like I just don't understand what that pitch count could even be, right? Is it per side? Is it just total reps in a game, right? Is he going to play for 60 snaps in a game? Is he going to play for 80? Because generally you're seeing about 60 to 70 snaps per side, right? Offensive side, generally you see 60 to 70 snaps. Defensive side, same thing. And so he has the chance of seeing somewhere around 120, 140 in week one if you were to play both sides the whole game. Now, again, they have him on a pitch count for a reason. It's because that's just not sustainable, especially week one. You just don't want to do that. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see, like, how much does Travis Hunter actually play in this game? And is it even, right, on either side, offense and defense, or does he play more offense than defense, or vice versa? I think that's going to be really interesting to see, and I think the Jaguars are kind of holding that card because that's an advantage that they can have because it's tough to game plan against. I think Travis Kelce said it in a podcast. He was like, I would just throw deep balls against Travis Hunter the entire game to get him tired, right? Being able to necessarily hide what you're going to be using him for is a way so that they can't necessarily always game plan that. And then lastly for this game is, which Trevor Lawrence do we see out there? Trevor Lawrence, he had a lot of promise going into last year. And to me, I mean, he had a very disappointing year, especially after signing a big contract. Does he come back with a vengeance, right? Does Trevor Lawrence prove that he deserves to be, a franchise quarterback in the NFL? He has the weapons, right? Brian Thomas, I've talked about, and then obviously Travis Hunter, who they got second overall. Those are great receivers. So it's time for you to go out there and prove that you belong. And I think this game against the Panthers is a great opportunity for him to do that. The Panthers defense isn't necessarily the strongest aspect of this team. And so he has a really good opportunity to show he belongs as a franchise quarterback out there. And how I really see this game going, I think that the Panthers are actually going to pull this one out. I think the Panthers are going to win this game in Jacksonville 20-17. And I think you're going to see a huge momentum shift in the NFC South, where people are going to start paying attention a little bit more to this Panthers team. Right? I don't think they're necessarily at playoff caliber yet, but again, I do think that the Panthers are going to win this game 20-17. We're actually starting to get into the 4:00 slate of games for Sunday. So we're a little bit over halfway there. Again, in the comments, let me know, is there a game that you're most excited to see? Is there an upset that you're expecting? Leave those in the comments below. I'd love to hear your take on this week in these games. Also, again, if you haven't, make sure you subscribe to this channel. I'm on my road to my first 100 subscribers. I'm going to be doing live shows every Monday and Wednesday. Mondays, not that the regular seasons are going to happen, or it'll be a review of what happened, my key takeaways from the games. And then Wednesdays will be a preview for the upcoming week. So I'll be going live Monday and Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern. Make sure you subscribe so you're able to join. Again, I want this to be as conversational and as engaging as possible. So throw your takes in that chat. Tell me what you think. Comment. Tell me games, or tell me if my takes are terrible. Right? I want to hear what you think of my takes, and we can discuss them. I'm all for that. That's a huge aspect that I enjoy about football and about being here on YouTube. Is I want to be able to engage with you all and have a good time. So feel free, again, chat, comment, whatever that might look like, but also make sure you subscribe as well. Let's dive into the 4:00 slate of games. So first game of this slate is the Titans at the Broncos, right? So Tennessee is heading to Denver, and the Broncos are actually favored by 8.5 in this game. The media and the sports betting world are pretty high on the Broncos this year, and I'm curious to see if that actually ends up being the case this year. I do have a little bit of reservations against the Broncos, and we can talk more about that in a different segment. But for me, obviously the most obvious thing about this game is, like, everyone's wondering the same thing. It's like, how I'm just curious to see, like, how Cam Ward handles what might be the best defense in the NFL, right? the Denver Broncos have a lockdown defense, right? Secondary, pass rush, linebackers, you name it, they're stacked. And Cam Ward is playing his first NFL regular season game against Patrick Surtain, Nick Bonito, right? Kyle Allen. Like, these are studs on the defensive side. And this is his first game. He's playing away, and he's playing in the Mile High City, right? This is a very tough environment to play in, regardless of how good the Broncos are, right? You got the elements of elevation, you got a hostile crowd, and it's your first game, right? This is going to be a huge test for Cam Ward. And the Titans lack offensive weapons, right? They need a lot out of Calvin Ridley for them to see really any sort of success in this season, and especially in this game, right? Their offensive weapons are not their strong point. And so for me, like, the biggest things I'm looking for, I'm not expecting a lot out of Cam Ward. Like, what I'm looking for is, does Cam not make mistakes? Right? Can Cam Ward eliminate mistakes in this first game? Right? He doesn't have to win this, but like, can he manage this game well in his first NFL start? Because there's going to be a lot of nerves. Again, they're a stellar defense, and he just doesn't have the offensive weapons this year to be able to be successful, in my opinion. So just alone, can you just minimize your mistakes in this game, Cam Ward? Because that will be to me, that will show he actually is deserving of that number one pick. Because again, you're winning this game is going to be near impossible, in my opinion. On the other side, does Bo Nix get off to a hot start this season? Something that I said before, Bo Nix ended the season really well last year. Something that I found to be really interesting is he was 0-7 against playoff teams last year, right? Bo Nix didn't beat like a single good quarterback last year, or good team, right? He lost the games he was supposed to lose or expected to lose, and he won the games he should have won. But he didn't necessarily do anything last year to show me that he actually deserves to have the amount of respect that he's really getting this season. I think he's a good quarterback, and I think him and Sean Payton are a great duo. But at the same time, he has to still prove it to me, right? Probably less than Michael Penix, but at the same time, Bo Nix still has some stuff to prove to me in order to say this is a Pro Bowl caliber, franchise caliber quarterback. And so to me, getting off to a hot start would be a really good start for that. And then, like I said, their defense is stacked, and so if Bo can get out there and handle business, I see the Broncos actually demolishing the Titans. I see them winning really big in this game. I think it's going to be a pretty easy game for the Broncos in Week 1. I see them winning this game 28-10. That's where I see this game going. 28-10 Broncos. Next game we're going to dive into, another divisional game, right? So they actually set up a lot of them Week 1, which is pretty surprising. And we're going to talk about the 49ers and the Seahawks, right? 49ers are actually favored in this game by 2.5. First off, I don't understand that. What are people paying attention to when it comes to San Francisco? It has to just be like the media saying that the 49ers are going to bounce back, because that alone is surprising to me. The Seahawks, in my opinion, are a much better team than the 49ers. And so for me, the first thing I need to see is, like, what does CMC look like out there? Like, is he actually ready to go this season? Right? CMC is becoming an older running back at this point, and he played very minimal games last year. He played like in a total of 4 games last year. And this is someone that has had injuries in the past as well, right? He's been pretty solid like the couple years prior to this, but the guy has seen a lot of injuries in the past. Like 2023, he played in 16 games. 2022, 17. Before that, the years prior, he played in 11 games, 6 games, 7 games, 3 games, right? Those were the 4 years prior to that. His first 3 years in Carolina, he played all 16 games. Last year, he played in 4. I mean, he's 29 years old, right? They use 30 as the marker, but again, this guy's seen a lot of injuries, and so for me, is he going to be able to carry this team along with George Kittle? Because I talked about this in a previous video. The receiving core for the 49ers right now, it's pretty scary, right? Their receiving core, the amount of injuries they have, Jawan Jennings out, probably out. Jordan Watkins probably out. Brandon Ayuk out until week 6 at least, right? Demarcus Robinson suspended. So you're talking about Ricky Pearsall, Marquez Valdez Scantling, who like I just don't think is a viable weapon anymore, and then Sky Moore, right? Those are your receivers that are most likely going to be out there throughout the game. I think Juwan Jennings will probably play. How ready he is to play, I'm not really sure. So to me, it's coming down to George Kittle and CMC in this game. That's going to have to carry the load. And so for me, that's a huge aspect. Is CMC actually ready to play this year? Because to me, that's a huge scare for me, and why I have the 49ers getting last place in this division. Now, how does Sam Darnold look out there with this new team? That's another unknown, right? Is it Vikings Sam or is it the Sam from the Jets and the Panthers? Right? He had one really good year in his career so far. And the Seahawks are banking on the fact that that was, the rule, not the exception. And so to me, that's going to be a huge aspect of the success for the Seahawks this year is, can Sam Darnold of the Vikings be the Sam Darnold of the Seahawks? Because if it's the Jets and Panthers Sam Darnold, they're going to be in a lot of trouble this year. The other aspect that I'm really excited to see is Jackson Smith and Jigba ready to be wide receiver number 1, right? They let Tyler Lockett run or leave, and they let DK Metcalf go as well, right? And so Jackson Smith and Jigba is the guy in Seattle now. And I'm a huge fan of his. I think he's an amazing route runner. He has great hands. He's not a speedster, right? He's not going to be someone that's going to have game-breaking speed, but he just finds ways to get open, like all the time. He reminds me of like Anquan Bolden in that sense. Like, Anquan Bolden wasn't like a speedster, but like he just always was open. And so to me, Jackson Smith and Jigba with his hands and his ability to get open could be a huge factor for success with Sam Darnold, especially in this game against the 49ers. The 49ers, they have some big losses on their defensive side, especially in the secondary. So how are they going to be able to handle, this Seahawks offense? Are they going to be the 49ers defense of old, or are there going to be some gaps that they're going to have to continue to work on filling in this 49ers defense? Because again, they let some big secondary players leave, like Hufanga and Charvarius Ward. So I'm curious to see how those new faces go for the 49ers in the secondary. I'm talking about like Renardo Green. Lenore's been there. Lenore was the guy that got truck sticked and steamrolled by Ashton Genty, right? That's probably why he's listed as questionable right now. He's still licking his wounds from Ashton Genty just running him over like a bulldozer. So there's question marks on this 49ers defense that people aren't necessarily talking about. Now to go into what I actually expect from the final result, I see the Seahawks winning this game 24-17, right? Again, this game is in Seattle, right? And so for me, I think that's going to be a huge factor in how they do, right? The Seahawks have an amazing environment, right? They call them the 12th man, and I expect them to show up big for the Seahawks. And so, again, I see the Seahawks winning this game 24-17. Now let's get into what I think will be the best game in the 4 p.m. time slot. And I'm obviously talking about Eastern time zones when I talk about 4 p.m. games. But the Lions are playing the Packers in Green Bay, and this is obviously an in-division game, and this is like a really exciting game for a couple different reasons. Mainly for me, it's the fact that these two teams are Super Bowl contenders, and they're in the same division. Now, there's obviously a bunch of other reasons why this is going to be interesting to me, but based off of what I'm hearing, I'm not sure we're going to get this chance to see Micah Parsons out there, who's dealing with like a spinal cord injury. Like, talk about terrible timing. They just signed him to a huge deal, and they're talking about how he's been limited in practice, and he might even get an epidural to play in this game. I've talked about Matt Stafford, and I'll talk about him again next, but I do not like back injuries. I do not trust back injuries. Those things linger. They're inconsistent or unpredictable, right? I think that's the best way to put it. Back injuries are unpredictable. You never know when it's going to flare back up. And when you're Micah Parsons and you're pushing up against a 300 plus pound tackle, you're getting chipped by a tight end or a running back regularly, right? That is going to pay a toll on your back on a regular basis. And so for me, is Micah Parsons even going to be able to play? And if he does, how much do we even see him out there, right? How effective can Micah Parsons be as a pass rusher? Now, they obviously have other good defensive players, and they have a really good young defensive group. I'm thinking of like Rashawn Gary, Lucas Van Ness. I'm talking about Quay Walker, right? Like, those are solid players for the Packers, but they just sold the house for Micah Parsons with that contract they gave him. So if he's not able to be out there in week one, it's not the end of the world. But I think everyone's waiting to see Micah Parsons in a Packers jersey. So that's number one for me. Now, on the other side, it's an obvious one, right? It's how do the Lions look with these new defensive and offensive coordinators, right? Not a lot of people are talking about that, but not a lot of people are sure like what this is going to look like, right? What do the Lions look like with these new offensive and defensive coordinators? The talent is still there, right? They have a great receiving core. They have an amazing running back room. Their running back room is phenomenal, right? Between David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, that's like such an impressive backfield. They also at wide receiver, you still have obviously Amon-Ra St. Brown. You have Jameson Williams. I like Khalif Raymond, but Sam Laporta is an amazing tight end as well. So like they have the talent there. It's just, can they get in sync? Can they get in a flow? And week one is really the first opportunity for them to do that. Right, Jared Goff has done a great job of being a consistent quarterback for them for a couple years now. And so can he get them up to speed as quickly as possible? Because you're playing a divisional game in Green Bay week one. Now, some interesting aspects that I want to see from the Packers side on the offensive side is, what does this wide receiver room look like? A lot of people are talking about the talent that they have, right, in their receiving room, but at the same time, it's still somewhat unproven in a sense to me, right? Like Jaden Reed, is he going to be healthy, right? Is Jaden Reed going to be out there? How good is Matt Golden, right? They drafted Matt Golden. He was the first first receiver they drafted in the first round in like 20 years. There had to be a reason that they did that. And so for me, like, is Matthew Golden really going to be a true wide receiver one? They trust in Romeo Doubs, which I think is fair. But then you have like Dontrevion Wicks, who, again, what is he really going to be able to accomplish this year? I'm not 100% sure. So to me, again, what does this receiving core look like? I mean, when you look at the numbers from last year, Jaden Reed was the best receiver with 857 yards, and he had 6 touchdowns. But behind him was Tucker Kraft, a tight end. He had 700 yards. Christian Watson, who's no longer with the team, had 620, and then Romeo Doubs had 601. And so this is a little bit more of an unproven receiving core than I think a lot of people are necessarily talking about. And so that I'm really curious to see how they work. I think Jordan Love is a playmaker. That guy knows how to sling the ball down the field, sometimes makes more mistakes than he should. But again, I'm curious to see how they look against the Lions. To me, I see the Lions offense coming out humming. I think there's a lot of people that are putting a lot of weight on the offensive and defensive coordinator situation. There is validity to that, but I think these players, and I think they just have that connection. Like, they have such a good culture there And to me, I see the Lions offense humming. I see them coming out and winning this game 28-24. So this will be one of your higher scoring games. I expect both offenses to work well, but again, Lions are going to win this game 28-24. We have one more 4 o'clock game to go over. Let's talk about the Texans at the Rams. So obviously, first things first when it comes to this, it scares me that McVay had to come out and confirm the fact that Matthew Stafford would start in this game, right? You know, it's funny. Like the media talks about Lamar Jackson's foot injury and talks about how he had to leave practice. Like John Harbaugh didn't have to come out and confirm Lamar Jackson was going to be playing Week 1 this week, right? But Matt Stafford's back has been bad enough that it kept him out for most of like the preseason and training camp, that they had to actually like reiterate the fact that Matt Stafford will be playing. And to me, that's a huge issue. Like that shows like how real this back injury really is, and I don't trust his back. I really don't. Like I think Matt Stafford is one of the toughest, hard-nosed quarterbacks there is. That guy plays through so much. But when you're 37 years old with a back injury, I just can't I can't rely on that. I can't trust it. And so I think, to me, how does he actually respond in week 1 is going to be a huge, huge indicator for what it looks like for the season to come. Again, backs can flare up at any time, but I want to see what he actually looks like out there. Is he comfortable? Is he confident? And then also, what does his connection look like with Davante Adams? Because of the fact that he's had to miss so much of this preseason and training camp, what does their relationship look like? Like, how do they look like they're in sync, right? He does obviously have Puka Nacua and Kyron Williams, who I think is a great running back, right? He already has great weapons, but you brought in Davante Adams for a reason, and I don't think it's for him to be wide receiver 3. I think he's going to be the second, potentially maybe even the first option in certain games and certain game plans, right? And so that relationship is going to be really curious to see. And then for the Texans, like I just want to see how this offensive line looks. Like how do they handle the pass rush of the Rams, who have a very young, impressive like pass rush, right? They have a really good line with Braden Fisk and Jared Verse as their key rushers. And so for me, it's how does the Texans offensive line look? Are they actually able to keep CJ Stroud off the ground? And then on the same extent, it's how do they look helping Nick Chubb, right? Mixon is out for an undisclosed amount of time, and they were lucky to get Nick Chubb, in my opinion. Nick Chubb is a great running back. I know he's getting older and he's had some serious injuries, but that guy was the lifeblood of the Browns. Besides Myles Garrett, letting him walk, I think, is crazy. So I think Nick Chubb can have a huge impact on the Texans, especially starting this season out. And he's probably the biggest key to the game for the Texans, because I'm confident that C.J. Stroud is going to be able to pass the ball around, right? He's got great weapons. But at the same time, they have a brand new offensive line. And I know probably a lot of Texans fans are saying, like, it can't be worse than it was last year, which is fair. But at the same time, like, you still have to keep C.J. Stroud up for them to win games. And so I really am curious to see what their offensive line looks like. I do expect this to be a high-scoring game, and I think the pass rush of both teams are going to be impressive to watch. I do think that this is going to be a game where the Texans win it 24-20, and I think a big reason for that, again, is the amount of time that Matt Stafford has been able to spend with this team. And I know there's only a couple newcomers, but it takes time to get in a flow and get into a rhythm. And I think the Texans have been able to be together throughout this preseason, so that's a big reason why I see them being able to win this game in Los Angeles, 24-20. Last game we're going to get into, and this is an exciting one. This is a rematch of the AFC divisional game. I'm talking about the Ravens versus the Bills. The Bills are favored in this game by 1.5 points, which actually says, in my opinion, that there's people out there that are expecting the Ravens to win this game, right? Again, generally the home team starts out with a 3-point favorite right away. And so with a point and a half favor in this game, there's more people betting on the Ravens to win this game. And I think this Sunday night matchup is going to be a really exciting rematch of what we saw. There are going to be a couple players out, in particularly on the Ravens side. I've heard recently, I think it was announced today, that Isaiah Likely, the tight end, who's been a really high riser for the Ravens, he's not going to be playing in this game against the Bills, right? I'm also hearing that it's looking like Patrick Ricard and Jair Alexander will probably be missing this game for the Ravens as well. That fullback, Patrick Ricard, is probably one of the most undervalued players in the NFL. Like, that guy is a huge aspect of the Ravens' success, is Patrick Ricard. Like, that is a huge loss, and I think that alone could be a reason why the Ravens could potentially lose this game. It's just not having Patrick Ricard out there. I don't think people respect him enough to understand like the value he has for this team. But that really worries me that both Isaiah Likely and Patrick Ricard aren't going to be playing this game. Because ultimately what this is setting up for is the Mark Andrews revenge game, right? Does he make up for that loss on that 2-point conversion against the Bills to tie that game and potentially put it into overtime? Right? Mark Andrews had a big drop, he had a big fumble in the game against the Bills in that divisional game, and this is the game where he's got to face it right away. It's like, hey, am I going to make up for this? Right? That's going to be a huge aspect of this game, is how ready is Mark Andrews for this season and for this game? Because if you don't have Isaiah Likely, like, you are the tight end option for Lamar Jackson. Now, talking about Lamar Jackson, this is 2 MVP quarterbacks going head to head in week 1. That alone is box office. That alone is exciting. Like, Josh Allen, well deservingly of the MVP last year. Lamar Jackson, probably just as deserving of that MVP, right? He was the MVP the year prior, but Lamar Jackson's numbers were insane last year. And I would say Josh Allen, again, he deserved his that MVP as well. Like, he wasn't working with the weapons that people were expecting to do much for the Bills last year, and he turned them into a high-powered offense just purely on Josh Allen's back. Now, James Cook did a great job as well, but to me, it was because of Josh Allen. So a lot of this game, especially the way the media are going to position this, is this like it's going to be a validation, right? This is going to be a validation game. I think that will be the main narrative around this is, do the Bills belong as, like, did they deserve that win against the Ravens last year in the playoffs? And if the Ravens win, it's like, hey, they're overcoming their mistakes and they showed up in a big game when they should have. So, like, I think that's going to be interesting to see, is like, from a narrative perspective, is like, who overcomes that, right? Is it the Bills proving that they still, like, that they belong there and what happened should have happened? Or did the Ravens show, like, hey, like, we're coming to play this year, and you're not going to be as lucky as you were last year. If the Ravens win, I do think it's going to be because of their defense. They focus very heavily, especially in the draft, on the defensive side, right? Malachi Starks, the safety, as well as Mike Green, the edge rusher, they're going to need to be important factors in this game. The Ravens struggled last year in that playoff game in the pass rush. They were not necessarily getting to Josh Allen, which then led them to being able to move the ball down the field because their receivers had the time to get open. And so that's where Malachi Starks comes in. Is he going to help lock down, this pass offense? Is he going to keep Josh Allen at bay and not allow him to just run the ball and scramble for first downs when needed? Right? I think that's going to be a huge aspect, is the safety tandem for the Ravens. Like, I'm really excited to see what Malachi Starks and Kyle Hamilton look like up with each other. Right? Kyle Hamilton just signed a huge contract. It's like the biggest safety contract in history. And then you have their first-round pick, Malachi Starks. That could be the best safety duo potentially in the NFL in a couple of years. I don't expect it to be right away, but I do think that this safety tandem could be a huge factor and an X factor for what happens with the Ravens this year. Lastly, I'm curious how the Bills handle, Derrick Henry in the running game for the Ravens, right? The Bills have good defense, but they're lighter. Like, they're a pretty light defense, and they are going to be going up against a very heavy offensive line and a 250 pound freight train running back named Derrick Henry, right? And Derrick Henry is still out there doing it. He's older, right? He's 31 years old, but he's still out there doing it, and I think that's going to be a huge aspect of this game as well. In the first game last year that the Bills played the Ravens, Derrick Henry ran all over them. They couldn't stop him to save their lives, and so for me, that's a huge aspect of this. The X factor I have for the Bills is going to be Dalton Kincaid. Again, the Bills don't have the best receiving room. They have some talent. Like, I like Keon Coleman, but Dalton Kincaid to me is the best tight end in the league. I really do believe that about Dalton Kincaid, and so if he's able to see success, if he's able to get behind or get open from these safeties like Kyle Hamilton, like Malachi Starks, I think that's what is going to be the leading factor to the Bills' success. Whoever of these two teams have the better game, I think will be the winning team. It's obviously a simple statement, but they're so even that it's like whoever doesn't make the most mistakes, like whoever plays their brand of football the best is going to win this game. And for me, just based off of the injuries that the Ravens have going into this game, I have to side with the Bills. I think the Bills are going to narrowly win this game, and I think it'll be another high-scoring game. I think it's going to be 28-24 Bills over the Ravens Sunday night. So those are all the games that I wanted to cover today. I'll talk about the Monday night game on my Monday live show. Again, I go live Mondays and Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern. Mondays will be to cover the recap of what happened the week prior. I'll also get into the Monday night game. And then Wednesdays are going to be a preview for the upcoming week, talking about the Thursday game and then the Sunday games coming up. So I'll be doing these live shows Monday and Wednesday. I'll be putting out content as well throughout the week. Please, again, make sure you subscribe to this channel, like, comment, tell me what you think about these shows. Feel free to comment and chat in the comment section, whatever that might look like. I'm trying to build an awesome community of football fans where we can get together, have a good time, share our takes, good or bad. Again, feel comfortable with either one of those. That's it for me today. I really do appreciate everyone who joined today. I hope you all enjoy week 1 of the regular season. Football is upon us. Let's all enjoy it. This is Bad Takes with Bad Takes in Football, signing out.